Welcome, everybody, to Krystal, Kyle, and friends. Excited to have on today Oliver Larkin, running in Florida's 25th district, running against Jared Moskowitz, a self-described Ron DeSantis Democrat. I'm not kidding about that. Probably not the smartest thing to do when you're running for election to describe yourself as a Ron DeSantis Democrat in the Democratic Party. But Oliver, thanks so much for joining us, man. We appreciate it.
Yeah, great to be on with you guys.
So you've been making quite a bit of news lately in the closing days of your race. The thing that probably blew up the most and made many people happy is that you went on Fox News directly in the lion's den and you called Donald Trump a pedophile to the face of one of the hosts, who then panicked and ended the segment. Take a look at that, everybody.
How many children can be raped and it's fine if you're in relation to the immigration community?
If we're going to talk about children being raped, then we need to hold this pedophile president, Donald Trump, accountable, and all those that have been implicated by the Epstein files that the Department of Justice is still not leaking. They've sent AIPAC after Thomas Massey for having the temerity to hold
Larkin,
accountable the pedophiles that are in control of our government.
Thank you.
All right, Oliver, balls of steel. Tell me about what happened there.
You know, I was trying to give the responsible answer, the politician answer, when he was asking me, they were playing the tape of immigrants coming over the border from Morocco into Spain. And he was asking, shouldn't you be afraid of this? Shouldn't the American people be scared that this is going to happen? And I was like, what's there to be afraid of people coming to seek a better life in the United States? And he's like, well, what about the crime? What about the crime that immigrants commit? And I said, well, we have a legal system that adjudicates violent crime. And also immigrants commit crime at lower rates than U.S. born citizens. And he said, well, what about the rapes? What about the children that are being raped? And I was like, okay, bro, if we're going to talk about children being raped, then we're going to address the elephant in the room of the pedophile president. So, you know, they were really testing me. And I think it's almost like with Fox News, they try to dare you like not to address the hypocrisy. And I think when you do address the hypocrisy, then they scurry into their corner and, you know, send you to commercial.
Yeah, he panicked. He melted down.
He was like, okay. I mean, I think he genuinely didn't know what to do in that circumstance.
Thanks for joining us, Oliver. Thank you. Next.
Because he doesn't want to. I mean, as an anchor, I can imagine he's thinking like, okay, I don't want to litigate with this guy about like Trump being in Epstein files a million times and the allegations against him and whatever. So best thing to do is just, okay, thanks, bye, go on a commercial break. But what a wild moment. Talk about, I mean, you're running against Jared Moskowitz. Tough district, you know, tough primary, all those sorts of things, DSA-backed candidate. What did that
You're
moment...
the DSA-backed candidate, not Jared. Sorry,
obviously.
I just want to clarify.
What did that moment mean for your campaign? And I feel like since then, you've just been getting media request after media request. So how has all of that been going?
I think, you know, there's this wrongful assumption that the left only wants to fight Democrats. And I think what that showed is that I'm more than willing to throw a punch against the fascist conservative party. And I think that really resonated with people in our district. I mean, we're hearing about this now on the doors with our phone banking.
That's awesome.
Like people, it was really a breakthrough moment because I think people have waited so long to just see candidates call Fox and call Republicans out on their BS. And that was really a moment where I was able to show that I have all the smoke for Jared Moskowitz, but I'm also doing this because I don't think he's fighting hard enough against these Republicans where it's so easy to call them on their hypocrisy. And I think Republicans, you know, just count on Democrats like Jared Moskowitz to, you know, conform to the political, you know, established rules and not, you know, really call them out when there's this, you know, huge specter of the Epstein files. So I think it was an enormous moment for our campaign. We've seen just tremendous growth in our campaign's following and the organic reactions. And yeah, it's definitely made me a lot more of a desirable guest for these platforms. I've been on CNN, Fox News, News Nation, many other platforms. And I think the more that I'm able to show that.
Sorry, I was going to say, Krystal, Kyle, and friends, breaking points.
yeah, straight up. Yeah. This has been, you guys have been, you know, really platforming the DSA candidates and showing that, you know, this is where the country is going. And this is what the Democratic voter base wants to see. They want to see someone, you know, who's willing to fight against the Republican Party. And when Jared Moskowitz is not fighting hard enough because he's a DeSantis Democrat and he's bragging about his friendship with Matt Gaetz and how that got him appointed by DeSantis. I mean, it's just so unpalatable with the moment we're in where Democrats have been so feckless and unable to stop, you know, a second Trump election. And now, you know, we've seen them catering. We just saw Peggy Flanagan destroy Angie Craig in Minnesota because Angie Craig was the only Democrat in that state to vote for the Lake and Riley Act, and I'm running against the only Democrat in our state who voted for it. And I think Democratic voters are done with that.
I feel like there's this massive imbalance in the media, and even among politicians too, I think you can say, where like all the right does is fight the left. Like they are excited. Like the people on Fox News get excited every day to wake up and fight the left. And like we haven't returned that energy until now with all like people like yourself, DSA type people. And I do feel like it's done the country a disservice up until this point to have such weak Democrats always try to meet the Republicans halfway. Because like even the so-called liberal media outlets like CNN and MS Now, they're really like both sides false equivalence networks. So we're really fighting back against this like tsunami. And now finally like we're breaking through. So speak to that. Speak to the DSA people who have like successfully broken through, now getting eyes and attention on them. I think like we haven't had a left that's really like robust and powerful and strong and aggressive. And right now it's finally coming to fruition.
Yeah, I mean, we're not apologizing for the views that we have. I think a great example is Daria Lisa Avila Chevalier in New York City. I mean, the media, the corporate media really tried to get her to back off of a lot of her previously held positions. And she said, no. And I think that is a marker of authenticity and consistency that's really been missing because I think far too many establishment Democratic candidates and elected officials are like so quick to apologize or so quick to back off of a position at like the slightest inkling that it might not be palatable in the corporate media. And I think that just shows a weakness and an unwillingness to actually have a backbone and stand up and fight. We've seen this, play out in many different races across the country where the corporate media is so willing to criticize like bad tweets on the left, but, will allow for Randy Fine to say there needs to, for every one Israeli mother that cries, we need 1 million Lebanese mothers to weep. Like they've got such an imbalance in terms of what they're willing to hold to account for candidates on the left and candidates on the right. And I think it's a disservice for those of us on the left to be apologizing for positions that are, strongly held core convictions. We had the largest racial uprising for justice in American history in 2020, and now we have candidates that are backing away from that. And I think it just shows that there's an unpalatable kind of feeling that they feel where it's like, I don't want to be criticized by the corporate media. I want to play nice. And sometimes you need to be a little bit more antagonistic. I mean, the American people don't trust the corporate media. So why are we going to conform to their kind of preconceived notions of how a candidate should think or act? It's not where Democratic voters are. I don't think it's where independent or Republican voters are at either. And I think, trying to campaign in this box that the media draws for us is just a disservice to really where, the grassroots energy is. And I think that's what we're trying to embody and represent.
Talk a little bit more about Jared Moskowitz, because you are in the Democratic side running against a true villain who, like the Republicans, actually spends a lot of time fighting the left. He's very energized about that. He's got that in common cause with the Republicans. But also, what signs are you seeing that you've got a shot in this race? Because I think this is, it's a difficult district. There was a whole redistricting thing. Florida's not exactly like ground zero for the socialist revolution, or maybe it is. Maybe you've started that or advanced that significantly. So talk to us about what you're seeing that gives you hope you could actually win this race.
Yeah, I woke up this morning to news that Laura Loomer and Randy Fine are coming to Jared Moskowitz's defense in the final days of this race, which is absolutely hilarious, but shows where the real coalition lies in Congress for
I'm sure
Jared
that's going to help him a lot with Democrats.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is someone who, the DeSantis relationship, the Matt Gaetz relationship, the fact that he's all the more willing to work with the Republican Party at the same time that he's voting to censure Al Green, voting to censure Rashida Tlaib, is always punching left. And he doesn't actually have the courage to stand up and campaign in our district. The Sun Sentinel said that this is a disservice to voters, that is, shows a disrespect and an unwillingness to defend his own record. And I think some of the markers of really the coalition that we're building, the Florida AFL-CIO declined to endorse Jared Moskowitz at their statewide convention. He was the only incumbent Democrat not to receive the endorsement of the statewide AFL-CIO. And we've gotten the endorsements of the Communication Workers of America, 1199 SEIU, who I was with on the picket line yesterday outside of HCA Florida Woodmont Hospital. HCA is by the way, the for-profit hospital corporation that Rick Scott was president and CEO of when he committed the largest Medicare fraud in U.S. history and got a $300 million golden parachute that, springboarded his political career. And Jared Moskowitz is taking their corporate PAC donations and trading their stocks. So, we're really showing that among the labor movement with 1199, with SEIU Florida Public Services Union, with the Committee of Interns and Residents, with IATSE, Local 500, we're really building a labor coalition. We're bringing people together that stand a lot to lose. And I think they're already seeing what they're losing with milquetoast neoliberal Democrats like Jared Moskowitz that are failing to stand up. I mean, we're talking about the first Democrat in Congress to join the Doge caucus. A self-described twice-appointed Ron DeSantis Democrat, the only Democrat in our state to vote for the Lake and Riley Act. This is someone who is, only having a D next to his name because he's been running in Broward County, Florida. But I think what we're seeing with the Democratic electorate is that, just having any blue will no longer do, that we really need people that are going to stand up and fight for us, and people with the courage to actually stand up before a crowd of voters and respond to their questions. I think it's a real mark of cowardice that Jared Moskowitz has declined to so much as appear beside me or say my name over the course of this campaign. And I think it's because when he realizes that if the word does get out that he's being primaried, that Democratic voters are going to flock towards us, which I think is why we're seeing so much of this late breaking momentum that's coincided with me going on Fox News and calling Trump a pedophile. We're seeing the poll numbers close, and we're seeing tremendous grassroots enthusiasm because Democratic voters are ready for something a lot better than what Jared Moskowitz has been offering.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't Moskowitz go on Fox News, very contrasting situation from your appearance on Fox News, to tell them that he was to the right of J.D. Vance on Iran? Isn't that a thing that actually happened?
Yes, he said he is to the right of the J.D. Vance-Witkoff approach and agrees more with Lindsey Graham and probably Senator Tom Cotton on Iran. And this was at the same time that, as a sitting member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, he purchased Lockheed Martin stock on 4 separate occasions leading up to the illegal war that Trump started on Iran.
Wow.
So this is the level of just rank corruption and personal profiteering that we're seeing in the kind of two-party neoliberal, neoconservative establishment that's just looking for a war anywhere they can find one. So Jared Moskowitz is, yes, he goes on Fox News to agree with the Republican Party. I'm going on Fox News to show that I can throw a punch, and that as a DSA candidate, I'm not just running against the Democratic Party, I'm running to change politics as a whole. And the Republican Party has been such a destructive force in this country that my biggest problem with Jared Moskowitz is that he's not fighting them hard enough, and it's because he holds a lot of their same positions.
I also wanted to point out he voted to censure the legend Representative Al Green, who, remember, he stood up to Trump during one of his State of the Union addresses and responded to him. And the Democrats tried to make a whole show of we're not out of bounds like these Republicans. We will police our bad guys. Well, it turns out the people actually loved what Al Green did there. Talk a little bit about his foreign policy record as well, because I feel like that's probably the area where he's most ripe for criticism, where, as Abdul would say, Moskowitz is okay with sending our money to go blow up innocent people, but he doesn't seem to want to spend the money in his district in Florida.
Yeah, we're talking about one of 22 Democrats who voted to censure Rashida Tlaib after she called out the genocide. We're talking about one of the tax cheat 12 Democrats, as reported by the American Prospect, who voted to cut $14.3 billion in IRS funding that would have gone after billionaire and corporate tax cheats to send that as more military aid to Israel. He literally authored the House amendment barring the State Department from citing data from the Gaza Health Ministry, including death tolls. Truth Out reported that as literal genocide denial. And Jared Moskowitz has been party to some of the most atrocious United States foreign policy. When the International Criminal Court issued arrest warrants for Benjamin Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant, Jared Moskowitz compared the ICC to the Harry Potter Ministry of Magic in terms of how meaningless he felt that international law is when it comes to enforcing, laws against genocide and apartheid and more war crimes. So this is someone who has had some of the most destructive foreign policy. When Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie introduced the bipartisan Iran War Powers Resolution, Jared Moskowitz and friend of the show, Josh Gottheimer came out immediately and said, we're opposed to this. Jared Moskowitz even called it the Ayatollah Protection Act. Of course, they found Jared Golden and a few others to kind of be the rotating villain. So Moskowitz didn't have to actually vote for it, because we know that Hakeem Jeffries and House leadership are trying to inoculate their most vulnerable Democratic incumbents from primary challenges. But this is who Jared Moskowitz is. He's a warmonger. This is someone who, even in his time in the Florida House of Representatives, was extremely hawkish on Iran. And what we've seen in the months since this illegal war began, he's purchased General Dynamics stock. He's purchased more defense stock. He's personally enriching himself off of this bloodshed that has been from the very first day of this war, when the United States bombed a girls' school in Minab. Jared Moskowitz, even before October 7th, was advocating for more weapons testing, for more joint military exercises in the Middle East to, quote unquote, show the Iranian regime what we're capable of. And I see what we're capable of after the first day of this war, with the United States committing more war crimes. And I think there's a real imperative that Jared Moskowitz feels not to enforce the ICC arrest warrants, because what would that expose United States public officials to when they've been party to so many of the war crimes that the Israeli government and the IDF have committed with our taxpayer dollars and with our complicity? It's just a can of worms that people like Jared Moskowitz do not want to open up. But I think the people of the people of the United States want to see this level of accountability, and we cannot hold the highest levels of our government officials above the law. We need an equal standard applied, the way that when South Korea's President Yoon Suk-yeol instituted martial law, they threw him in prison. When Jair Bolsonaro incited January 8th in Brazil, they sent him to prison. And I think, that's the kind of disposition that we need our Congress to have when it comes to Donald Trump and Marco Rubio and Pete Hegseth. It's not just Iran. It's the boat strikes off of the Caribbean and the Pacific coast, murdering innocent fishermen with no due process. And this is just a wholesale who Jared Moskowitz is. He is a warmonger. He is a war profiteer. He is someone who is going to perpetuate this endless war abroad that, we've really suffered from over 2+ decades in the last, quarter century of United States history.
Oliver, are they taking you seriously? Are they spending money against you? What's the nature of their attacks against you?
It's very interesting you say that, Krystal, because after I went on Fox News, $650,000 in super PAC ads came in for Jared Moskowitz in this district.
Wow.
One super PAC, New Democrat Majority, invested $250,000. This is a shell group for Wall Street banks. And it's previously been used as a shell pack for DMFI in a Nebraska race, which DMFI has endorsed Moskowitz. And then OpenAI and Palantir have a super PAC that is spending over $300,000 in ads for Moskowitz. And of course, Moskowitz is against a moratorium on AI data centers. He posts AI slop on his page all the time. And Palantir, as we should note, moved their corporate headquarters to this district, to Aventura, and they're working hand in glove with ICE to carry out this campaign of mass detention and deportation with warrantless surveillance on people in the United States. So the establishment is very scared. They're pouring money into this district because they see that our campaign is gaining real momentum, and they're trying to protect someone who is going to work hand in glove with the Sam Altmans and with the people. He's previously taken money from cryptocurrency. This is who is funding Jared Moskowitz's campaigns, in addition to AIPAC, of course. So they're definitely scared, and they're pouring money into this district. But we know that organized people beats organized money, and we're still raising money as well. And we're up on the airwaves and are sending mail and are working very much to reach voters in this district to turn them out on August 18th.
What are you finding is the most potent messaging for you against Moskowitz? Like, what are you seeing and hearing from voters in terms of their concerns that can make a difference in this district in particular?
Well, the fact that Congressman Moskowitz has not held a single public town hall since he was elected to office, and it's in large part because he's afraid to answer to the fact that he joined Doge or voted for the Lakin Riley Act or any number of other issues. I think it's been our public presence and my willingness to go into hostile oppositional media, to have public town halls, to join the Democratic candidate forums, and just take questions without any kind of any kind of veil of secrecy. I think that's been really refreshing to the voters of this district, where we have a leadership vacuum in South Florida. In Broward County, we've had Sheila Cherfilus McCormick, who resigned from Congress under a corruption scandal. We've had Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who I would count as one of the maybe 10 most people responsible in the Democratic Party for Donald Trump's election from her stewardship, if you can call it that, of the Democratic National Committee. And then we have Jared Moskowitz. So Democratic voters in Broward County, the highest Democratic voter registration county in the state of Florida, have had really deficient Democratic leadership. So we've been filling that void. When I talk to voters, this is a district with a lot of older people, a lot of retirees. So when they see what DOJ has done to the Social Security Administration with the reduction in force orders, where 8,000 SSA workers have been laid off, these are voters that are really struggling to get coverage for their Social Security benefits, or to be able to get on the phone with someone for their VA benefits or for their Medicare or Medicaid. And that's directly attributed to the DOJ effort that has wiped out entire agencies of the federal government. When we look at what it's done to SSA, or what it's done to the VA, or what it's done to any number of other agencies, the Department of Education, for instance. So we're hearing from voters a lot about just the capacity of the federal government. We're hearing so often, I mean, I'm not the one that's saying, did you know that we have an authoritarian secret police force? This is what voters are telling me when I say, do you know that Jared Moskowitz was the only Democrat in our state to vote for the Lake and Riley Act? They'll tell me, I can't believe I protested the Vietnam War. I was alive for Watergate. I cannot believe that we're at this place where our democracy feels like it is so much at threat. And we have a Democrat that's been party to this campaign of mass detention and deportation after Donald Trump promised it explicitly on the 2024 campaign trail. So the immigration issue is an enormous one in this district, of course, DOJ, and then the cost of living. And when Jared Moskowitz is taking money hand over fist from any corporate PAC, Florida Power and Light, for instance, raised our rates by $7 billion this year in Florida. And Jared Moskowitz has taken over $27,000 from their parent company's corporate PAC and is also trading many of these same corporate entities' stocks. This is the corruption that voters see and feel. When Jared Moskowitz bought the dip during Donald Trump's trade war on April 7th of last year, bought the dip with Marjorie Taylor Greene as the two members of Congress, people just rightfully see that there's tremendous corruption, and it's not restricted to the Republican Party. Unfortunately, we have candidates like Jared Moskowitz that are also party to this corruption. And the democracy and cost of living issues are so intertwined that when people see Elon Musk spending $275 million to buy an election, AIPAC over $200 million to buy an election, and then Jared Moskowitz doing their bidding, it's directly tied to the cost of living and why we're sending all of these billions of dollars for endless foreign wars and dismantling the federal government. And at the same time, people can't afford their gas, their rent, their groceries. And that's what we're hearing from voters at the doors and on the phones.
Didn't he run and hide from a debate with you, or did I make that up?
So this has been some controversy with this, because we know that Jared Moskowitz knew that this debate was happening. It was hosted jointly by the Broward and Miami-Dade Democratic Black Caucuses at the Ebenezer Baptist Church in Hallandale Beach, Florida, in Broward County. The 25th district has two candidates right now, me and Jared Moskowitz. There's no one else running in the Democratic primary. And we, of course, accepted. I've been willing to debate Jared Moskowitz anytime, anywhere. He's been unwilling to even so much as appear beside me for joint editorial board interviews, like with the South Florida Sun Sentinel. That's why they declined to endorse him. He said he's not going to appear alongside someone who's running against him solely because of his religion, who accepts support from figures like Hassan Piker and Mike from PA. You know, this is what Jared Moskowitz is focused on in this district. So I went to this forum. It was supposed to be a debate. It ended up just being me standing before a church full of Black residents in the pews and speaking to the material issues that are affecting Black voters in this community. And what would Jared Moskowitz have to say to a group like this? I mean, when he is describing himself as a DeSantis Democrat, one of the most explicitly racist governors in recent Florida history, he's got nothing to say to a community like this. So he's been, kind of ducking and running for cover and saying, well, I didn't know that this was happening, even though we have the paper trail and the text messages to show that he was invited weeks before this forum took place. But he's just kind of trying to muddy the water and make all of these excuses for why he's unwilling to show up and answer questions. But we got a loud round of applause there. They asked me what distinguishes me from my opponent, and I said I'm here, and that was like a 30-second applause line. because voters are just so hungry for someone that actually is going to stand before them and give them answers and give it to them straight on what we believe. And I think it's just a disservice that Jared Moskowitz does to voters. It's really disrespectful. It's arrogant. It's entitled. It's everything that you don't want from a public official. But he's been really trying to muddy the waters and escape accountability for refusing to show up to that.
Oliver, tell me about the Hassan Piker of it all. He is supporting you. You've been on his stream before. And is this obviously establishment Democrats are trying to make him a huge issue. The right is trying to make him a huge issue, say that it's completely unacceptable to have anything to do with this guy and really paint him as this boogeyman. Kyle's going to set up what Scott Jennings, the way he defamed him recently. But I'm just curious, is this breaking through in the district? Are people asking you about Hassan Piker at the doors? Is this like when you went to that forum, is this a question you would get from the audience? Is this coming up at all, like on the ground with actual people in your race?
So what we hear from voters is positivity. I'm hearing from young people that are showing up to our events that they found me through Hassan Piker's stream. That's how they became aware of our campaign. This is what's driving so many of our volunteers, so many young people, high school and college age students, and people in their 20s and 30s to show up and volunteer with us. So Hassan's support has really been instrumental in helping us build a coalition and reach new audiences. And I think it's very ironic that corporate Democrats and the establishment are freaking out about Hassan Piker, because I'm old enough to remember when Bernie Sanders went on Joe Rogan in the 2020 presidential campaign, and the establishment freaked out. They were like, how could you go on Joe Rogan's podcast when he said this, that, and the other? And then 4 years later, they were freaking out because Kamala Harris wouldn't go on Joe Rogan's podcast. And I think that's the kind of trajectory that we're on. Look, as public servants, as people seeking elected office, we have a responsibility to go before any and every platform. That's why I wouldn't hesitate to go on Hassan Piker's stream the same way that I wouldn't hesitate to go on Sean Hannity. I'm running to represent everyone in the 25th congressional district, and we don't have to agree on every single issue. But what Hassan has been doing this election cycle is really introducing a new media platform for so many candidates through Twitch streaming to reach disaffected voters, not just young voters, increasingly older voters that are just seeing there is no real distinction between the corporate wings of the Democratic and Republican Party when they're both taking the same Wall Street corporate AIPAC money on many of the most salient issues that are governing our lives, with war in Iran. That these two parties, they're more than happy to work with one another to further the foreign policy interests of AIPAC and of the Israeli government. And I think what Hassan has done so effectively is cut through that noise and really spoken truth to power in a way that ties in our foreign policy with our domestic policy. And now, voters can no longer put Pandora back in the box. Now that we've now seen that there's no ability to there's no reason to decouple our domestic and our foreign policy. We're really tying in a cohesive message, and it's been where I've gotten the criticism or when I've gotten the questions, it's been from like the Miami Herald editorial board, which for our 20-minute interview, 15 minutes of it was asking me about Hassan Piker and whether I would return the money, whether I would return the money, not just from Hassan, but from all of the donations that we've received from joint campaign appearances with him, which is like just an extraordinarily far-fetched idea that, like, for some reason I'm going to reject support that we've received from tens of thousands of donors across the country because Hassan has some 5 or 10 second clips that have been taken out of context from hundreds or thousands of hours of streaming online. Cable news and the corporate media does not do nuance very well, but I think that's what Hassan has really been able to do to great effect. And voters are looking for that more long form engaging content to really understand not just what a candidate's positions are, but how they think and how they arrive at them. And I think that's when, we see the deluge of spam fundraising texts and emails that I think are diminishing in their effectiveness. What voters are really craving is that personal connection to a candidate where they can actually feel like they know where a candidate's heart lies and how they think about issues. And I think that's why Hassan's platform has been so effective, and he's been very generous in kind of sharing that platform with so many amazing DSA and progressive candidates. So I'm very grateful to have his support, and I'm going to continue to not disavowing Hassan Piker anytime the corporate media asks me to.
Well, did you see that Scott Jennings, the smug CNN host, he did a little segment on his radio show, which nobody listens to, where he says that that Hassan supports resuming lynchings against black people, and he played a completely out of context clip where, and this is what his opponents do, is they'll find things that you could clip out of context and run on their own and make people think he's like, you know, the most insane person to ever talk politics on the microphone. But this is so far above and beyond that now you have like everybody and their mother is telling Hassan, you should probably sue this guy for defamation, because they've gotten away with so many lies for so long that now they're really shooting for the stars when they say that one of the top left-wing commentators in the country is in favor of lynching black people. Like, this doesn't even pass the smell test, right?
Yeah, they're really scraping the bottom of the barrel here. And I think in the case of Scott Jennings, he's probably auditioning for a White House role. I think it's abhorrent that CNN even employs someone like that. Jared Moskowitz, I will note, has been a guest on Scott Jennings' podcast. So he's more than happy to mix it up with people of Scott Jennings' ilk. Ever since I saw Kat Abu-Ghazaleh on CNN with Scott Jennings, and Kat was asked, do you believe in expanding Medicare for all to include undocumented immigrants? And she said yes. And Scott, said even the illegals. I was impressed with Kat's restraint, because I felt like I would have, lunged over the table to like throttle Scott for just he's willing to go, to such an extreme length to really just it's so inflammatory that it really makes me upset. And Hassan should, take legal action. I think that these kinds of attacks are really dangerous, because when you're ascribing motivations and intentions of violence to someone with Hassan's platform, with his public profile, when he's so willing to put himself out there publicly, it is reckless endangerment that he is, ascribing these kinds of beliefs and motivations to Hassan. And it's just patently false. So I think it's abhorrent. I think it's disgusting. And frankly, I don't think people like Scott Jennings deserve a platform in media.
Yeah, I think you're so right about CNN, especially because, this is also a guy, I came to know him when I lived in Kentucky because he was a top aide to Mitch McConnell. And now he's one of the ones who is on I talked to him, he's doing great, he's fine. Can't call into my radio show, but is perfectly fine, and just a minor fall, he'll be back at it sometime. And so even just from that perspective, like, this is a man who will just lie and cover up, and the fundamental dishonesty. Why would you have someone like that on your air? As someone who runs a media platform and has to think about like what guests to have on and who to include and employ and all that sort of stuff. I would never have someone who, maybe to like challenge them in an interview, but as like someone who is a paid contributor that just routinely lies and smears and is so inflammatory. It's crazy to me. And this is supposedly the liberal outlet.
Yeah, I mean, I think this speaks to the declining reputation of corporate media at large, that they're willing to go to such lengths just to stay relevant, because it's just rage baiting. That's really what it is. Like, they don't really care whether what Scott Jennings or any other conservative talking head will say, the fact that they'll continue to deny the results of the 2020 election, or they'll make these defamatory statements against Hassan Piker. It's all just mining for clicks and reactions and the social media algorithm. It's really disgusting, coming from a corporate media outlet that should have a responsibility to reasonably inform the American people. But I think this is, just a case in point of the direction that the United States has gone in since the 1996 Telecommunications Act, where we've seen the corporate media really just go in hyper-partisan directions. And even, purportedly centrist outlet like CNN is willing to have figures like Scott Jennings on their platform and make them a paid contributor and legitimize these points of view, even when they are, just against the basic facts of, like I said, the 2020 election, or anything else. They're more than willing to kind of subjugate themselves in an effort to pursue relevancy in a declining medium that is really being overtaken by platforms like Krystal, Kyle, and friends.
So I saw this earlier, wanted to get your reaction to it. This is how much the economy is absolutely cooked now. Apparently, here are the price increases over the last 7 years. Coffee is up 123%. Ground beef is up 81%. Eggs are up 76%. Gas utilities up 62%. Home prices up 60% from just 7 years ago. Auto insurance up 50%. Electricity up 43%. You go on and on and on here. What plans do you have? What policies do you have that you can't wait to roll out to try to help, regular working people who are struggling with everyday bills?
Yeah, it's funny. I had an insight into the conservative mind on Fox News Sunday with Shannon Bream. I was sitting in the green room, and they were going over a Fox News poll, and one of the panelists said, "I went to the grocery store the other day, and parsley is up 10 cents." They were looking at who benefits the most from Donald Trump's tax policy, and Fox News respondents, over 50%, said the wealthy and elite. So even among Fox News, there is just a regard that the economy is not working for anyone but the wealthy and well-connected. And so what I'm excited to do, I think we need, in a moment of climate crisis where, again, I mentioned $7 billion in rate hikes that FPL has brought against Floridians. We need public ownership of utilities. We need a real clean power plan that's going to electrify the grid with clean energy, no more fossil fuel extraction and consumption. This is why I believe in public ownership of the energy industry, because the Chevrons, the BPs, the oil and fossil fuel corporations, they're not going to move. The market's not going to move at the rate that we need to resolve the climate crisis, and people are really struggling with the cost of utilities. I'm also looking at, with our policies, purchasing 500,000 clean electric buses across the country, because auto insurance, the cost of leasing or owning a new car, has never been more expensive. And what we can do with making public transportation affordable, in my mind, free of cost, just to have people have the mobility to get around, I think that would do a tremendous amount to decrease the cost of living and the financial burden that people are feeling. I also want to see us pass legislation like the Homes for All Act that Ilhan Omar has introduced to repeal the Fair Cloth Amendment that caps the number of social housing units available at the number that existed in 1999. That's Bill Clinton signed into law, by the way, not a Republican. So Democrats have been party to the housing affordability shortage that we're really feeling the crunch on in South Florida. I want to see us raise the minimum wage to a living wage of $25 an hour with no loopholes for ADA minor or incarcerated workers. I don't want to see a tipped minimum wage anymore where bosses can wield power over their employees and have wage theft. We just need a flat minimum wage that addresses the cost of living and rises to $30 by 2030 and keeps pace with the rate of inflation. This is why we need Medicare for all. It's still going to take a lot of work, even within the Democratic Party, to pass it. But I talk to voters every single day who are really struggling with the expiration of the premium tax credits from the ACA after the One Big Beautiful Bill passed last year. Florida is one of 10 states that never expanded Medicaid under the ACA, and we're, I believe, the highest enrolled state in ACA coverage. And it's still not good enough for us. So we need Medicare for all. We need all of these broad-based universal economic programs like universal childcare, paid family and medical leave. Childcare is one of the most expensive aspects of life for new parents, and it's really cost prohibitive for so many people that are looking to start a family or even have a two-income household because they cannot find affordable childcare where the second parent can afford to go to work. So I think these are some of the things that we can do to immediately lower the cost of living. We're going to need to hold a line on the budget reconciliation bill in 2027 because hopefully if we're winning this race, that means that Democrats are taking back the House of Representatives, and we can use that as leverage. And I think those of us on the left, I've talked very often about forming a Socialists in Office caucus as kind of a counterweight to the House Freedom Caucus. And I think this is what we need to extract those same kind of material concessions that the House Freedom Caucus so often uses, raking Kevin McCarthy over the coals for 15 different votes for House Speaker. We need to be just as ruthless on the left and really prioritizing what is going to make a difference in the cost of living for Americans. And I think these are some of the ways that we can do it with public ownership of utilities and the energy economy, and having public ownership of transportation and healthcare, and so many of the other things that I just described as the means that are necessary to live a decent life in the United States.
Oliver, talk to me about the choice to embrace the term socialist. If you look at the polling, you still have a lot of Americans who get very nervous. Abdul Sayed, as a contrast, has said, no, I'm not a socialist, I'm a capitalist. What is behind your choice there? And also, when you do meet voters who say, I'm not sure about this, like when you say you're a socialist, what does that mean? How do you assuage their concerns?
Yeah, I mean, this was a choice I made. I've been a DSA member since 2020. I just started to describe myself as a democratic socialist in 2015 when I began working on Senator Bernie Sanders' presidential campaign. And democratic socialism, we see these concepts working quite well in many other countries. The United States, we hear oftentimes from conservatives this idea of American exceptionalism, that we have nothing to learn from other countries across the world, even though we're the wealthiest nation on earth, not to guarantee healthcare is a right, and we pay twice as much per capita for our healthcare with worse outcomes. Democratic socialism, to me, is a counterweight to capitalism, which we've seen over hundreds of years is just rife with inequality, with oppression, with the subjugation of labor and the working class. And I don't think that's where we're at in the United States, where we need to be, at least. The American people know that politics, as usual, are broken, that the status quo does not work for people, that we have corporate capture and billionaire and even trillionaire capture of our politics. And a necessary counterweight to that is not moderation, is not saying that we can have capitalism that's better regulated. I just think that we've seen how rife for fault that disposition is. And so for me, being a democratic socialist, what I tell voters that may be somewhat concerned about it, democratic is the operative word here. When voters are fear-mongered about socialism, they think of the repression of social, political, constitutional rights. I believe in a multi-party democracy. I believe in free and fair elections. I believe in freedom of speech, freedom of assembly. And what I regard as democratic socialism is just having the democratic control over the industries that govern our lives: housing, healthcare, education. These are things that we should have under democratic control, where we can collectively make decisions of how our government is run. I'm not saying that we need public ownership of every single industry in the country, but there are a few, like public transportation, like healthcare, like education, where we should have more democratic control over these things, because this is where we see costs running completely out of control. And I think what's been so encouraging in recent months is seeing the success of a figure like Mayor Mamdani in New York City, who is running as is governing as a democratic socialist in the financial capital of the world. And we see enormous voter satisfaction with his governance. I mean, voters have been so inoculated against this idea of socialism from political propaganda over decades, and yet when we see these practices being implemented, they're overwhelmingly popular. When we look at the most popular politicians in the United States of America, it is democratic socialists like Bernie Sanders, like Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and Mayor Mamdani. So there's nothing to fear from voters when we talk about democratic socialist principles that are really just helping us achieve the American dream.
To your point, Zoran has a 69% approval rating with the voters of New York City right now, which is it's just mind-boggling how much the people could like a politician. We're used to seeing people get elected and their numbers go right down, but his went right up, and it's been phenomenal to see. Oliver, the news that we're getting out of this White House is just so incredibly disturbing. I told Krystal earlier, a rule change pushed by White House officials would slash benefits or end support for as many as 400,000 supplemental security income recipients with Down syndrome, dementia, and other disabilities. So, they're cutting the social safety net so thoroughly that even the people among us who need the most help, people with Down syndrome and dementia and other disabilities, they're throwing them right under the bus. In the same way they threw 18 million people who were on Medicaid, kicked them off, threw them under the bus. In the same way they threw 4.5 million people, other people using the SNAP program, under the bus. What do you make of this just colossal destruction of the administrative state, the regulatory state, the social safety net? I mean, we've really never seen a wrecking ball like this Trump regime, and it's going to be a colossal undertaking to just get us back to the status quo beforehand, never mind improve upon it.
Yeah, I think this is why I don't hesitate to call this administration fascist, because when we look at the governing ideology of Nazi Germany in the 30s and 40s in the last century, it was not just going against Jewish Germans or people in Europe. It was going against people who were disabled, people who were on the margins of society. And when we hear Donald Trump talking about immigrants poisoning the blood of our nation, when we even hear from one of Trump's relatives with a disabled child talking about the callousness of Donald Trump, saying something to the effect of, "Wouldn't it just be better if you let him die?" This is the inhumanity of this administration, and we're really very far down the kind of multitude of steps to get towards fascist governance. And I think the slashing of the social safety net and this kind of regard that if you are weak, if you are on the margins, then you don't deserve to live, or you don't deserve the same standard of benefits or the same quality of life as other Americans, is just a poisonous ideology that has emanated across countries, from Europe to the United States, and it's really dangerous. And this is why we need to show our solidarity with the ADA community, as well as with the immigrant community and the queer community, any other marginalized group that this Trump administration has gone after. We need to ensure that the most vulnerable among us are provided for. And this is not a drain on our resources or something that we should not be investing in. This is the marker of a decent society where those who are in need are provided for, where we have a decent standard of living for everyone. And I think when we look at programs like Medicare for All, making sure that we have home health care, that we have as much autonomy as possible for people living with dementia or with severe disabilities that might keep them homebound. We need to ensure that people are empowered and have agency over their lives. And I fear very much what this Trump administration is doing is going to contribute to more needless deaths. I remember the story of the father of a disabled man who was detained by ICE, who had been his caretaker for many decades, and as soon as he was detained, his son passed away because his caretaker had been put under ICE detention. And I think these are the ramifications of this cruel and inhumane Trump policy, and this is why those of us who are opposing it need to ensure that this is not just for when we talk about if you work, you should not live in poverty. It's not just people who work that shouldn't live in poverty. No one should live in poverty in the wealthiest nation in the United States of America. And we should not be in a position where we're cutting benefits for food assistance or for home health care or for survivor benefits or for SSDI or any other program that is going to keep people safe and secure and shield them from the really cruel world out there when Trump is trying to pull away so many of these benefits. I think it is just disgusting, and all of us need to oppose it.
Oliver, what do you attribute Trump's popularity in Florida? I mean, Florida was the quintessential swing state. Florida. It always was razor thin margin, going back years. Now it's shifted hard right. Obviously, you got DeSantis in there. Trump winning by, didn't he win by like double digits in Florida? It was like a large margin. Why do you think he's so popular, or was? I'm not sure that I think that blooms off the rose a bit, but why do you think that he became so popular in Florida?
Just to interject real quick, recent polling shows 42% to 46% in Florida approve him, which is higher than most
many
of the country.
Places.
But he's
a little bit underwater.
But he's underwater now, yeah.
But 42% for him is like pretty good at this point.
Totally.
What do you attribute that to?
Old people.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is, we do have an older population here. We have, this is a state with no income tax. So people don't really feel that connection to government being able to materially improve people's lives. We don't really see the return on investment of our taxpayer dollars in this state. And so when people have mistrust of government and feel that it is unable to materially address their concerns, they're going to look at the private sector. They're going to look for how they're going to get ahead. And I think there's kind of an anti-solidaristic nature to what Trump and his ilk really proposed, that in Florida, we have a lot of people who come here, not just from other parts of the country, but from other parts of the world, many of whom flee from countries that the United States has destabilized: Cuba, Nicaragua, Colombia, Venezuela. And they come here and they buy into the Republican argument that it is the fault of socialists or communists that life in their country has gotten worse, and not because Ronald Reagan, funded the Contras in Nicaragua, because we've had 60 or 70 years of a blockade on Cuba that has completely throttled the economy of what should be one of our most natural trade partners in Florida. So there's really been the top-down pressure of a United States foreign policy that has really led to destabilization in these other countries, and those people move to Florida, and the political propaganda, which is not just a problem in English, the Spanish language political propaganda is really an intense issue in our state. And we see Republicans like Rick Scott campaign very heavily in Latino communities and Spanish-speaking communities, and Democrats really they pull punches. They're so quick to, when we were talking earlier about Democrats that are so quick to apologize or to distance themselves from the left. I mean, we see that play out here over and over again. Democrats will run for statewide office and say, I'm not one of those crazy socialists. I'm actually sane and moderate. And so they're immediately so quick to excise the more progressive parts of the coalition. But Republican voters are just going to go for the real thing every single time. So I think Democrats in our state have failed to fully embrace the populist economic agenda. For instance, when Floridians, more than 60% of us, passed a $15 an hour minimum wage amendment in 2020, the Florida Democratic Party treated that proposal at arm's length. They weren't really willing to fully embrace it. And to me, that is just absolutely confounding that we have Democrats in the state that they've just taken the line where they need to take corporate money because it's a big state. It's expensive to advertise in. And so when I talk about Florida Power and Light, they're the corporate sponsor of the Florida Democratic Party's annual gala for the last several years running.
Wow.
So they're not going to say anything about lowering the cost of living. So I think that's where voters in the state just don't trust that the Democratic Party actually means what it says or says what it means. There's a real trust deficit that exists in our state. And I think there's also just an entrepreneurial spirit that Republicans have spoken more directly towards. And when I talk about my platform as a democratic socialist, this is, I think, what many people in Florida who are aspiring to climbing the economic ladder to greater prosperity, to living the American dream, they can actually really benefit from a democratic socialist vision. I think it's been such an interesting aspect of Mamdani's campaign and administration that he's really prioritized cutting red tape for small businesses and making it easier for people to kind of grow their own business and be entrepreneurial. And I think that's something where Republicans have really just had a monopoly in our state. And I think it is also just the fact that there are so many people here that have really just lost faith in the Democratic Party as a whole. And we have not seen really this kind of robust Democratic Party that's willing to fight for progressive values. I will note that the last time Florida was really competitive in 2018, we had a statewide candidate in Andrew Gillum endorsed by Bernie Sanders and campaigning on Medicare for All. And that's the last time that Florida was truly a swing state. Ron DeSantis was elected with less than a 1% margin. And I think that's where the Democratic Party needs to return to if we're going to see Florida become competitive again.
Yeah, the left-wing ballot initiatives always doing really well, but then the Democratic candidates not doing well is a real giveaway that, like, hey, why don't you embrace these things that are doing really well? But they weren't able to really connect the dots, huh?
Yeah, not too much. One other question I had for you, Oliver, is my understanding the district's very diverse, that you have a lot of non-English speakers. There's a large Latino community. How have you been reaching out to them? And has there also been, there have been some news stories about Cubans, for example, who have gotten a different treatment with regard to immigration than other immigrant groups. And that hasn't so much been the case under the Trump administration. Has there been a bit of an eye-opening experience for some of the Latino communities in your district and in Florida more broadly?
Yeah, without question. And our district is, in addition to being very heavily Latino, we also have significant Haitian and Portuguese-speaking Brazilian communities. So when we're canvassing, we have campaign literature in English, Spanish, Creole, and Portuguese. We're doing intentional and specific outreach to each one of these communities with our organizers, with our volunteers. And Jared Moskowitz, I think, likes to paint the Latino community as a monolith because our district is 25% Latino. He was on CBS News Miami the other day and said it's 25% Cuban, which is just like laughably false. But he doesn't really care to engage with the community that much. And I think he's trying to shore up his losses because the Laken Riley Act and this ICE campaign of mass detention and deportation, it really has targeted without any kind of subtext anyone that they can racially profile as quote unquote not belonging here. I've been to the ICE enforcement and removal operations facility in Miramar, Florida, in Broward County. This is the point where immigrants with temporary protected status or other immigration statuses go for their checkups to make sure that their paperwork is in order, that they're quote unquote doing things the right way, as we always hear Republicans say they need to do. But they'll show up, they'll drive from hours away in some instances because they don't have very many of these facilities across the state. They'll be forced to wait overnight for hours on end in these brightly fluorescent lit buildings with linoleum floors, with no bedding, no place to rest. They'll just sleep on the floor in these office complexes as their family members, as their children are waiting outside. There's a group called the Circle of Protection with the American Friends Service Committee that I've attended, and they just provide some small comfort, toys for the kids, and some food and drink and shade for family members that are waiting for their loved ones inside. And this is oftentimes the point of family separation, and people who go to these ICE era facilities are then taken to privately run GEO Group administered ICE detention centers, or they're taken to Alligator Alcatraz, since closed, but that's been the case for a lot of this Trump administration. And these organizers that are waiting outside of this facility, they'll catalog where are the people who are showing up for their appointments coming from. And it is Haiti, it's Venezuela, it's Cuba, it's Colombia, it's Nicaragua, it's countries all across Central South America and the Caribbean, and many countries like Cuba, where the people who have come here have been afforded a greater degree of privilege to be in this country and to enjoy more benefits. But there is no discrimination with this kind of broad-based immigration enforcement where they don't care if you're Cuban or Nicaraguan or Venezuelan or Brazilian or Argentinian. If you speak Spanish, you're a target. If you speak Creole, if you speak Portuguese, you're a target to be rounded up. And I think that is really what's precipitated so much of the backlash that we've seen in our state. Eileen Higgins was elected mayor of Miami, the first Democratic mayor in a quarter century. We've seen state house and state senate districts flip across the state of Florida. Boca Raton elected their first Democratic mayor in 30 years. So we're seeing this backlash to the Republican immigration policy. And it's really attributed to the fact that they're not even necessarily checking people's immigration statuses before hauling them off to Alligator Alcatraz. I've spoken with folks in the community who have family members with legal paperwork, with the ability to stay here, that have just been detained and taken to these detention centers before they've even had their status checked. I mean, it is just absolutely abhorrent the way that this government is targeting and discriminating against immigrants. And I think that's been part of what's motivated the sea change in sentiment, and the fact that Donald Trump is now underwater with his approval rating in Florida, because we've seen, I'm sure all of us have seen the viral clips of the Cuban Floridians who said, I didn't think that he was going to come after me, or I didn't think that he was going to come after my family. The people voting for the leopards eating people's faces party, is the prize that the leopards are eating people's faces.
That's exactly right. Oliver, thanks so much for joining us, man. We appreciate it. Tell everybody how they can support your campaign, where they can follow you, when to go vote, because I know the election's pretty soon.
Yeah, early voting is open through Sunday, August 16th, and Election Day is Tuesday, August 18th. Polls are open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Get out there and vote. You can find all of that information at oliverforcongress.com, where you can look up our campaign issues. You can sign up to volunteer. If you're local, you can canvass with us. If you're remote, you can phone bank with us. Please also donate some money. We're going up against, like I said, $650,000 in super PAC spending. All of the APAC money that Jared Moskowitz has, we're 100% grassroots funded. So oliverforcongress.com. Make sure to go out there and vote on August 18th, and let's win this race.
Yeah. And if you guys can help him in any way, please do so, because this would be a huge one.
This would be giant.
This would be a big one.
This would be like Dave Bratt taking out Eric Cantor during the Tea Party wave on the right.
Throwback.
Because it's a little bit under the radar.
With AOC taking out Crowley too, but like this would be the next version of that. You know what I'm saying? And tell me, Oliver, are you able to run any TV ads? Because has been driving me crazy when our lefty candidates can't run TV ads.
We're running ads across the district. We've got a TV ad that was cut by Alex O'Keefe, who did Ed Markey's Green New Deal ad. So we're broadcasting that across the 3 counties. I spoke with a USA Today reporter yesterday who said he's seeing it everywhere. So all of the money that we're raising, we're putting back out into our paid media. So we're doing everything we can to reach voters, even across traditional mediums.
Love that. You're the man, Oliver. Appreciate you, man. Thank you for joining us.
Good luck, Oliver.
Thank you both. Thank you so much. Pleasure to be on.